The telegram arrived at dawn, and Nora Zimmerman's fingers trembled as she transcribed the message that would change everything she thought she knew about words and the men who spoke them. She had been working as a telegraph operator in Bentonville, Arkansas, for 2 years now, ever since her father passed and left her with nothing but debts and a small rented room above the general store. At 22, Norah had resigned herself to a life of tapping out other people's words, their joys and sorrows flowing through her fingertips without ever touching her heart. Until the day Jackson York's first message came through. It was February 1883, and the morning frost still clung to the windows of the telegraph office when the familiar clicking started. Nora's trained fingers moved across her notepad, transcribing automatically. But halfway through, she paused, rereading what she had written. The message was from a cattle buyer in Fort Smith to his business partner, dictated through a relay station, but at the end was a personal note to be delivered to someone local. Please forward to Jackson York, care of the Miller Ranch. Your mother is improving. The doctor says she will make a full recovery. She asks that you finish your business and not worry. Your presence here would only agitate her with concern for your obligations. She sends her love and her strength. Norah sent the confirmation and filed the message for pickup. She had heard of the Miller Ranch, of course. Everyone in Bentonville knew of the sprawling cattle operation 15 miles south of town. But she had never met any of the hands who worked there, as they rarely came into town except for supplies. 3 days later, another message came through, this time originating from Bentonville itself. Jackson York had come to the telegraph office while Norah was at lunch, and her replacement, old Mr. Henderson, had taken his message. But it was Norah who transcribed the return message that afternoon. To Jackson York, Miller Ranch, your mother continues to improve. She walked to the window today and watched the birds. She says to tell you that spring always comes, even after the hardest winter. She knows you understand. There was something in those words that caught in Nora's chest. The poetry of them, the way they said so much more than their surface meaning. She found herself thinking about them as she closed up the office that evening, wondering what kind of man inspired such messages, what kind of mother raised a son who warranted such careful, loving words. A week passed, then 2. Norah found herself listening for messages addressed to Jackson York with an anticipation she couldn't quite explain. Then, on a Tuesday morning when rain pelted the windows and turned the streets to mud, he walked into her office for the first time. She knew it was him before he spoke. He was tall, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, still damp from the rain. His clothes were worn but clean, the clothes of a working man who took pride in his appearance despite the demands of his labor. But it was his eyes that struck her, a deep brown that seemed to hold both sadness and strength in equal measure. I need to send a telegram, he said, his voice low and slightly rough, as though he didn't use it often for frivolous conversation. Of course, Norah replied, pulling out a fresh form. What is your name, Jackson York? Her heart did a strange little jump, but she kept her expression professional. And the message? He was quiet for a moment, looking down at his hands. They were scarred and calloused, the hands of someone who worked with rope and leather and the stubborn will of cattle. Finally, he spoke. To Mrs. Sarah York, care of Dr. Mitchell's residence, Fort Smith, Arkansas. Mama, I am glad you are well. The winter has been long here too, but the first calves are coming and they are strong. I think of you every morning when the sun rises. I see your strength in it. The work is hard but honest, and I am proud to do it. Your loving son, Jackson. Norah wrote quickly, her hand steady despite the emotion in his words. When she finished, she read it back to him for confirmation. He nodded and she calculated the cost. That will be 60 cents, she said. He counted out the coins carefully, and their fingers brushed as he handed them to her. The contact was brief, but she felt the warmth of his skin, the roughness of work-worn hands. He met her eyes for just a moment, and she saw something there, a flicker of recognition perhaps, or merely curiosity about the young woman who handled his most intimate words. "Thank you," he said, and then he was gone, the bell above the door jingling in his wake. Nora sat for a long moment, staring at the message form. Then she tapped it out across the wire, sending his words flying through the ether to his mother's waiting heart. As she worked, she imagined him riding back to the ranch through the rain, wondered if he thought of his mother watching the birds, if he found comfort in the work he described as hard but honest. The next message came a week later, a relay from Fort Smith. To Jackson, York, the calves sound beautiful. I always loved spring on a ranch. Remember when you were small and tried to ride that calf in the barn? You were so determined, so fearless. You still are. I am proud of you, my son. Love, Mama. Nora filed it with a smile. She could almost see the boy Jackson must have been, stubborn and brave. That afternoon, he came to collect his messages, and she handed him the slip of paper. She watched as he read it, saw the way his expression softened, the corner of his mouth turning up just slightly. "Good news, I hope," she said, unable to help herself. He looked up at her, and this time he really looked, taking in her dark hair pinned neatly beneath her bonnet, her blue eyes that she knew were too curious for her own good, the ink stain on her right index finger that never quite washed away. "The best," he said. "My mother is recovering from pneumonia. For a while we did not think." He trailed off and she saw him swallow hard. "Well, she is better now." "I am glad," Nora said, and meant it with her whole heart. "The messages between you are beautiful. I hope you do not mind me saying so. I transcribe many telegrams, but few with such care in them." He looked surprised, then pleased. "I did not know I could write beautiful words. I only finished school through the 8th grade before I had to work. But my mama taught me that words matter, that how we say something is as important as what we say." "She taught you well," Nora said softly. They stood there for a moment, the telegraph machine silent between them, and Nora felt something shifting in her chest, like a door she had not known was closed beginning to open. "I am Jackson," he said, holding out his hand formally. "Jackson, York." "I know," she said, taking his hand. "I am Nora Zimmerman. I am the telegraph operator here." "I know," he echoed with a small smile, and she laughed despite herself. After that, he began to come to town more often. Always with a legitimate reason, a message to send or collect, but Nora suspected the frequency was not entirely necessary. She found herself preparing for his visits, pinning her hair with extra care, choosing her better dress on days when she thought he might appear. Their conversations began to extend beyond the simple transaction of telegraphy. He told her about the ranch, about the new calves and the ornery old bull they called Hannibal, who had a talent for breaking through fences. She told him about her work, about the strange intimacy of handling other people's words, knowing their secrets and joys and sorrows. "You ever feel lonely?" he asked one day, knowing so much about other people's lives but being separate from them. The question took her by surprise with its insight. "Yes," she admitted. "Sometimes I feel like a ghost, present but not really there. I watch life happen through these messages, but I am not in it myself." "I understand that," he said quietly. On the ranch, surrounded by other hands, working alongside them every day, and yet still alone in the ways that matter. They looked at each other then, and Nora felt the connection between them like a physical thing, a telegraph wire carrying understanding back and forth at the speed of thought. The messages to his mother continued, and through them, Nora fell more deeply under Jackson's spell. He wrote about the land with a poet's eye, describing the way the wind moved through the grass like water, how the cattle moved in their own mysterious patterns that only they understood. He wrote about the other ranch hands with respect and affection, about the cook who made biscuits that could resurrect the dead, about the young boy who worked in the stables and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. His mother's return messages were equally beautiful, full of wisdom and warmth. She wrote about the garden she was planning now that she was stronger, about the books she was reading, about her memories of Jackson's father, who had died when Jackson was just 15. Through their correspondence, Norah came to know them both, to care about their lives and their happiness. One day in early April, Jackson came to the office with a different kind of tension in his shoulders. He had been sending his usual messages to his mother, but this time he stood at the counter longer than necessary, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Is something wrong?" Norah asked. "No," he said quickly, then paused. "Well, maybe, I do not know exactly. I was wondering if, that is, would you?" He stopped, clearly frustrated with himself. "I am better at writing than talking, it seems." Norah felt her heart begin to race. "You can write it down if that is easier." He looked at her gratefully and took the pencil she offered. She watched as he bent over the counter, his hand moving slowly, carefully. When he pushed the paper back to her, his ears were red. "Miss Zimmerman," she read, "would you do me the honor of joining me for dinner on Sunday evening? I know a place with good food and respectable company. I would very much like to spend time with you away from this telegraph office, though I have come to treasure every moment spent here in your presence. Respectfully, Jackson York." Norah read it twice, her smile growing with each word. Then she picked up the pencil and wrote her own message below his. "Mr. York, I would be delighted to join you for dinner. I too treasure our conversations and would welcome the opportunity to continue them in a different setting. Gratefully, Nora Zimmerman." She pushed the paper back to him, and when he read her response, his whole face transformed with joy. "Sunday, then," he said. "I will collect you at 6 o'clock if that suits you." "It suits me perfectly." Sunday arrived with agonizing slowness. Norah washed and pressed her best dress, a deep blue cotton with small white flowers that her mother had made for her before she died. She pinned her hair up, then down, then up again, finally settling on a style that was elegant but not too formal. She wanted to look nice for Jackson, but she also wanted to look like herself. He arrived precisely at 6, cleaned up and dressed in clothes she had never seen him wear, dark trousers and a white shirt with a vest that brought out the brown of his eyes. He had even trimmed his hair, though it still curled at his collar in a way that made her want to touch it. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength of him beneath her hand. They walked to the restaurant together, a respectable establishment run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson who served simple but delicious food. Jackson had reserved a table by the window, and they sat across from each other, suddenly shy now that they were here together, without the telegraph machine between them. "I have been looking forward to this all week," Jackson said, breaking the silence. "I hope I do not disappoint you now that you have to listen to me talk instead of reading my polished words." "You could never disappoint me," Norah said. "I love your written words, but I love your spoken ones too. They are just as honest." They talked through dinner about everything and nothing. He told her about learning to be a cowboy, about the first time he had roped a calf, and the pride he had felt. She told him about learning to use the telegraph, about the day her instructor had told her she had the fastest, most accurate hand he had ever trained. They talked about books they had read, places they wanted to see, dreams they had harbored and let go. "What is your dream now?" Jackson asked as they finished their meal. If you could have anything, what would it be? Nora considered the question carefully. Once, she would have said security, a home of her own, freedom from debt. But sitting here with Jackson, feeling the way her heart opened in his presence, her answer had changed. Connection, she said finally. I want to feel like I am part of something real, not just witnessing it from the outside. I want to matter to someone the way they matter to me. Jackson reached across the table and took her hand, his touch gentle despite the calluses. You matter to me, Nora. These past months, getting to know you through our conversations, I have felt less alone than I have in years. I feel the same, she whispered. He walked her home slowly, neither of them wanting the evening to end. At her door, he hesitated, then lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. May I see you again? He asked. I would like nothing more. Their courtship unfolded like a message being transcribed letter by letter, each moment adding to the complete picture. Jackson came to town twice a week when he could spare the time, and they would walk together, talking and laughing and learning each other's hearts. The messages to his mother continued, but now they included mentions of Norah. I have met someone, Mama, a woman named Norah who operates the Telegraph. She is kind and intelligent, and she understands the value of words. I think you would like her very much. The response came quickly. My dear son, I can hear the happiness in your words even through this wire. Tell me more about this Norah. What makes her special to you? Jackson's next message was longer than usual, and Nora's hands trembled as she transcribed it. She is special because she sees me, truly sees me, not just the cowboy or the ranch hand, but the person underneath. She listens when I speak and hears what I mean, not just what I say. She is brave in her own quiet way, making her own path in a world that often has no place for independent women. She makes me want to be better, to find words worthy of her. I think I am falling in love with her, Mama. Nora stopped typing, her breath caught in her throat. He had not said those words to her yet, had not spoken of love, but here it was in black and white, sent across the wires for his mother to read, and for Norah to see first. When he came to collect the response that afternoon, she handed him the file without meeting his eyes. But he must have seen something in her face because he asked, What is wrong? Nothing is wrong, she said softly. I transcribed your message to your mother. Understanding dawned on his face, followed by panic, then resignation. Then I know. They stood in silence for a moment, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, dust motes dancing in the light. Finally, Norah found her courage. Did you mean it? She asked. Every word, he said firmly. I know it is soon, and maybe I should not have said it, but I do not know how to be anything but honest. You read my words every day, Norah. You know how I think, how I feel. I am falling in love with you. I may have already fallen. Norah came around the counter, abandoning professionalism and propriety. She took his hands in hers and looked up into his worried face. I am falling too, she said. Maybe I started falling the first time I transcribed one of your messages, the way you wrote to your mother with such love and care. I have read thousands of telegrams, Jackson, but none of them ever touched me the way yours did. I fell in love with your words first, but now I love the man behind them even more. He pulled her close then, wrapping his arms around her in a way that felt like coming home. She pressed her face against his chest and listened to the steady beating of his heart, faster than usual, matching the rhythm of her own. I want to do this properly, he said into her hair. I want to court you respectfully, to give you time to be sure. I do not have much to offer, just a cowboy's wages and a rented room at the ranch, but I am saving money. In a year or two, I could have enough for a small piece of land, maybe start my own herd. I do not need land or money, Norah said. I just need you. They were married 3 months later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Bentonville. Jackson's mother had recovered enough to travel, and Nora finally met the woman whose words she had transcribed so many times. Sarah York was exactly as Nora had imagined her, warm and wise with eyes like her son's, full of understanding. "Thank you for taking care of my boy's words," Sarah said, embracing Nora. "And thank you for taking care of his heart." "He has taken care of mine as well," Nora replied. The wedding was small but joyful, attended by friends from town and some of the ranch hands who worked alongside Jackson. Old Mr. Henderson served as witness, and Mrs. Patterson provided the wedding supper. It was nothing fancy, but it was perfect, full of love and laughter and hope for the future. Jackson had saved more than Nora realized, and with help from the ranch owner, Mr. Miller, who valued Jackson's hard work and honest character, they were able to lease a small house on the edge of the ranch property. It was not much, just 3 rooms and a porch, but it was theirs. Nora gave up her position at the telegraph office, and though she missed the work sometimes, she did not miss the loneliness that had come with it. Life as a ranch wife was harder than she had imagined, but more fulfilling too. She learned to cook for a working man, to tend a garden in the difficult Arkansas soil, to mend clothes worn thin by hard labor. Jackson would come home each evening exhausted and dirty, but he always had a smile for her, always found the energy to ask about her day, to share the details of his own. They wrote letters to his mother together, filling her in on their new life. Sarah had returned to her own home in Fort Smith, but remained in close contact. Her health had stabilized, and knowing her son was happy seemed to give her new strength. One evening in late autumn, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, Jackson pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "I wrote something for you," he said, suddenly shy. "I know we see each other every day now, that I can speak the words instead of writing them, but I wanted you to have this. Something permanent." Nora unfolded the paper carefully, recognizing his neat handwriting immediately. She read, "My dearest Nora, when I first started sending telegrams, I thought I was just communicating facts, information necessary for survival and connection. I did not understand that words could be bridges, that they could carry the weight of a heart from one person to another. You taught me that. You saw something in my simple messages that I did not even know was there, some part of my soul that I had not learned to recognize. You fell in love with my words, but you made me fall in love with them too, made me see that I could express things I felt but did not know how to say. Now every word I write, every sentence I speak, is better because I am speaking it to you. You are my connection, my home, my heart made visible. I love you today and will love you tomorrow and every day after that. Forever yours, Jackson." Tears streamed down Nora's face as she finished reading. She folded the letter carefully and held it to her chest, then reached for Jackson's hand. "That is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever said to me," she whispered. "I meant every word. I know you did. You always do." Their first year of marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. The work was hard, the money tight, but they had each other, and that made everything bearable. Jackson proved himself invaluable to the ranch, and Mr. Miller increased his wages and his responsibilities. Nora found ways to contribute too, taking in sewing and helping Mrs. Miller with her accounts. She had a head for numbers and organization, skills that proved useful in running a large operation. In the spring of 1884, Nora discovered she was pregnant. She told Jackson on a Sunday morning after he had returned from checking on the new calves. He was washing up on the porch when she came out with a cup of coffee for him. "I have news," she said, unable to keep the smile from her face. He turned to her, instantly alert to the happiness in her voice. "Good news, the best. We are going to have a baby." The tin cup clattered to the porch as Jackson swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with tears. "A baby," he breathed. "Our baby. Are you sure? Are you well? Do we need to call the doctor?" She laughed at his sudden panic. "I am perfectly well. I saw the doctor yesterday to confirm. He says everything is as it should be. The baby will come in December." Jackson placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach, all written across his face. "December. A winter baby. We will need to prepare to make sure the house is warm enough to stock extra wood, and you should not be working so hard. I will talk to Mr. Miller, see if we can get some help with the heavier chores." "Jackson," she said, covering his hand with hers, "we have months to prepare. Right now, I just want to enjoy this moment with you." They told Sarah in a letter that very day, and her response came quickly, filled with joy and advice and offers to come help when the baby arrived. Over the following months, as Nora's belly grew, Jackson became increasingly protective and attentive. He built a cradle from wood he carefully selected and sanded until it was smooth as silk. Nora sewed tiny clothes and blankets, marveling at how small they were. Their friends rallied around them. Mrs. Miller threw a small party for Nora, and the ranch wives brought gifts they had made, offering advice and encouragement. Even old Mr. Henderson sent a package with a silver rattle and a note congratulating them both. As autumn turned to winter and Nora's time grew near, Jackson began to worry. He had lost his father young and knew how fragile life could be. Every evening he would sit with Nora, his hand on her belly feeling the baby move, and she could see the fear mixed with joy in his eyes. "I am going to be fine," she assured him. "Women have babies every day." "I know," he said. "But you are not every woman. You are my woman, my wife, my heart. If anything happened to you, I do not know what I would do." "Then it is a good thing nothing is going to happen to me," she said firmly. "I am strong. The doctor says the baby is positioned well, and I have you. That is all I need." The baby came on a cold December night during the first real snowfall of the season. Jackson rode through the snow to fetch the doctor and Mrs. Miller, who had experience with births. The labor was long and difficult, and Jackson wore a path in the porch boards with his pacing, unable to stay inside where he could hear Nora's cries of pain. Finally, as dawn broke over the snow-covered landscape, a baby's cry pierced the air. Jackson rushed inside to find Mrs. Miller smiling broadly. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy, strong boy." Jackson moved to the bed where Nora lay exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. She looked up at him with tired, happy eyes. "Meet your son," she said. Jackson took the baby carefully, as though he might break. The infant was red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. He was the most beautiful thing Jackson had ever seen, aside from his wife. "Hello," Jackson whispered. "Hello, little one. I am your papa." They named him James, after Jackson's father, with the middle name William after Nora's. Little James York came into the world with his parents' dark hair and his mother's blue eyes, and from his first day, he was loved fiercely and completely. Sarah came to visit when James was 2 weeks old, making the journey despite the winter weather because she could not stay away from her first grandchild. She stayed for a month, helping Nora recover and teaching her the skills of motherhood that could not be learned from books. Jackson watched his mother with his son and felt a deep contentment settle into his bones. This was what life was supposed to be, he thought. This connection, this love, this family they were building together. The years that followed were full and busy. James grew from a baby into a toddler, then a bright, curious boy who followed his father everywhere when Jackson was home. Jackson was promoted to foreman, overseeing the other hands and helping Mr. Miller make decisions about the herd and the land. With the increased wages, they were able to save more aggressively toward their dream of their own land. Norah proved to have a talent for raising chickens, and her eggs became sought after in town for their rich color and flavor. The extra income helped, but more than that, she loved having her own enterprise, something that was hers alone. She taught James to gather the eggs gently, to move slowly so as not to frighten the hens, and she watched with pride as her son learned responsibility and care. When James was 3, Norah became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1888, arriving with the wildflowers and the new calves. They named her Jane, and she came into the world with a loud cry that seemed to announce she would not be ignored. With 2 children, the small house felt even smaller, but Jackson had been planning for this. With Mr. Miller's blessing and some financial help, he had purchased a small parcel of land adjoining the ranch. It was just 20 acres, but it was theirs, with a creek running through it and good grazing land. He began building a house on it himself, working evenings and Sundays, often with James helping in the way of small boys, which meant mostly handing his father nails and asking endless questions. The house took 2 years to complete, but when it was finished, it was everything they had dreamed of. 4 rooms downstairs and 2 up, with a wide porch and a view of the creek. They moved in the summer James turned 5, and that first night in their own home on their own land, Norah and Jackson stood on the porch after the children were asleep and marveled at what they had built together. "Do you remember the first message you sent for me?" Jackson asked, his arm around Norah's waist. "About your mother's recovery," Norah said. "How could I forget? That was when I first started to notice the way you wrote, the care you put into your words." "I was so worried about her," Jackson said. "I felt helpless, so far away and unable to do anything but work and wait for news. Those telegrams were my only connection to her, my only way to show her I cared." "They were beautiful," Norah said. "They made me fall in love with you before I even knew what you looked like." Jackson turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I never imagined that the woman who transcribed my clumsy attempts at expressing love for my mother would become the woman I loved more than life itself. You were supposed to be invisible, just another person doing a job. Instead, you saw me, really saw me, in a way no one else ever had." "You were never invisible to me," Norah said softly. "From that first message I knew you were special. I just did not know how special until I met you in person." They kissed on their porch on their land in front of their house, with their children sleeping safely inside. It was a perfect moment, the kind that makes all the hard times worth enduring. Over the next decade, their family and their ranch grew together. Jackson proved to have an excellent eye for cattle, and his small herd flourished. He remained foreman for Mr. Miller while building his own operation, and the 2 ranches worked in harmony, sharing resources and labor during busy times. Norah's chicken operation expanded to include selling butter and cheese made from the milk cow they had purchased. She also began teaching both James and Jane to read and write, passing on her love of words and learning. James grew into a responsible young man who loved working with his father, learning everything Jackson could teach him about cattle and land management. Jane was more interested in the business side, often helping her mother with the accounts and showing a remarkable head for numbers. They were different children with different gifts, but both were raised to understand the value of hard work and honest dealing. Sarah remained a constant presence in their lives, visiting several times a year and exchanging letters weekly. Norah had learned to write letters as carefully as Jackson wrote his telegrams, knowing that Sarah treasured every word. When Sarah passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1895, at the age of 68, the whole family mourned her deeply. Jackson took her death hard, but he found comfort in the fact that he had maintained that connection with her throughout her life, that he had never let distance or time diminish their bond. At Sarah's funeral, held in Fort Smith with burial beside her husband, Jackson spoke about his mother's gift with words and how she had taught him to express what was in his heart. He talked about how that gift had led him to Norah, how the words he wrote for his mother had captured Norah's heart and changed his life forever. "My mother taught me that words matter," Jackson said, his voice steady despite his grief. "She taught me that how we speak to those we love shapes the love itself, makes it deeper and truer. She taught me that distance is nothing if the heart is engaged, that a few carefully chosen words can carry more weight than volumes of empty chatter. I carry her lessons with me every day in how I speak to my wife, how I guide my children, how I conduct my business. She is gone from this world, but her influence remains in everything I do." Norah stood beside him, holding his hand, and knew that Sarah would have been proud of the man her son had become, the family he had built, the life he had created with intention and love. The years continued to pass, marked by the seasons and the rhythm of ranch life. James married at 22, a sensible young woman named Clara from a neighboring ranch, and they built a small house on the York land. Jane, showing no interest in marriage, instead traveled to Little Rock to attend a teacher's college, the first in the family to pursue higher education. She would return home during summers, full of new ideas and enthusiasm, pushing her parents to think differently about the world and their place in it. By 1903, Jackson and Norah were in their 40s, established and respected in the community. The York Ranch, as it was now known, had grown to over 100 acres with a thriving herd and a reputation for quality cattle. Norah's eggs and dairy products were sold as far away as Little Rock, transported by rail to eager customers who knew the York name meant quality. One evening in late summer, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset just as they had so many years before, Norah turned to Jackson with a smile. "You ever think about that telegram office in Bentonville?" she asked. "About the woman I was then, lonely and separate from the world, transcribing other people's lives?" "Sometimes," Jackson admitted. "But mostly I think about how grateful I am that I needed to send those messages, that circumstances brought me to your office and put my words in front of your eyes. What if I had used a different telegraph office? What if I had sent letters instead? Then I suppose we never would have met," Norah said. "And I would still be there, alone and lonely, watching life happen around me without really living it myself. And I would be a lonely cowboy, good with cattle and horses but poor with people, never knowing that words could build a bridge to someone's heart." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Jackson reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Norah took it carefully and unfolded it. It was the message form from his first telegram to his mother, the one Norah had transcribed that morning so many years ago. She looked at him in wonder. "You kept it?" "I started keeping them after I met you," he said. "After I realized that these slips of paper, these words I was sending, were more than just communication. They were evidence of love, of connection, of everything that matters. I have every message I ever sent through you, every response my mother sent back. They tell the story of who I was and who I became." Norah felt tears pricking her eyes. "That is beautiful, Jackson." "There is more," he said, pulling out a leather-bound book she had never seen before. "I have been writing it all down, the story of us. How I needed to send messages to my mother, how you transcribed them, how I fell in love with the woman who handled my words so carefully. I want our grandchildren to know how we found each other, how words on paper built a bridge between two lonely hearts." Nora took the book reverently and opened it. The first page was titled "The Telegraph Office" and began with a description of that rainy Tuesday morning when Jackson first walked through her door. She read a few pages, marveling at his memory for detail, his ability to capture not just what happened but how it felt. "When did you write all this?" she asked. "Over the years, a little at a time. Evenings after you had gone to sleep, early mornings before the work began. I wanted to get it right, to find the words that would do justice to what we built together." She kissed him then, a kiss full of love and gratitude and joy. "It is perfect. You are perfect." "No," he said with a smile. "I am just a man who learned the power of words from his mother and found love with a woman who understood them. That is all I ever needed to be." James and Clara gave them 3 grandchildren over the next several years, 2 boys and a girl. Jane eventually married as well, a fellow teacher named Robert who shared her passion for education. They remained in Little Rock but visited often, bringing new ideas and energy to the ranch. The York family grew and flourished, rooted in the land but connected by the bonds of love and respect that Jackson and Nora had built through their careful attention to words and meaning. As Jackson and Nora grew older, they slowed down but never stopped. They handed over the day-to-day operations of the ranch to James, but remained active and involved. Nora taught her grandchildren to gather eggs and read stories. Jackson taught them to ride and rope and understand the land. Both of them taught the children about words, about how to say what you mean and mean what you say, about the power of careful communication to build bridges and heal wounds. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1914, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. James had organized everything, from the roasted pig to the 3-tiered cake Clara had baked. As the sun set and the party continued around them, Jackson stood and called for everyone's attention. "30 years ago," he said, his voice still strong despite his 54 years, "I walked into a telegraph office in Bentonville because I needed to send a message to my mother. I was just a cowboy trying to stay connected to the woman who raised me, who taught me everything that mattered. But that day, I met another woman, one who would teach me even more about love and connection, and the importance of choosing your words carefully." He turned to Nora, who sat beside him with silver threading through her dark hair and smile lines creasing her face. "Nora, you fell in love with my words before you fell in love with me. You saw something in those simple messages that I did not even know was there. You taught me that words matter, that they can build a life and a love and a family. Everything we have, everything we built together, started with words on paper, with messages sent and received and treasured. You are my greatest message, the one I send to the world to show what love can be. Thank you for 30 years of happiness, for our children and grandchildren, for this life we created together. I love you today as I loved you then, as I will love you always." There was not a dry eye at the table as Nora rose and embraced her husband. "You always did have a way with words," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I am still falling in love with them and with you every single day." They danced that night under the stars, moving slowly to music played by James Robert on his fiddle. Around them, their family celebrated, but in that moment, it was just the two of them, a cowboy and a telegraph operator who had found each other through words and built a love that would last generations. As the years continued, Jackson began to slow down more noticeably. His back, bent from years of hard work, gave him trouble. His hands, scarred and worn from rope and leather, ached in the cold, but his mind remained sharp, and his way with words never diminished. He wrote letters to his grandchildren, carefully crafted messages that they treasured and saved. He wrote to Jane about her teaching, to James about the ranch, to Clara about the children. He filled journals with stories of his life, of his mother, of the early days with Norah. Nora's health remained good longer, but eventually, she too felt the weight of years. Her eyes grew weaker, making her beloved reading more difficult. Her hands, once so nimble at the telegraph key, sometimes trembled. But she remained the heart of the family, the one everyone came to with their problems and their joys, knowing she would listen and understand. In the spring of 1922, as Jackson approached his 62nd birthday, he became ill with pneumonia, the same disease that had nearly claimed his mother so many years before. The doctors came and did what they could, but modern medicine had its limits. Norah never left his side, sitting by his bed day and night, holding his hand and reading to him from his journals, reminding him of all they had shared. "You remember," she said one afternoon as he drifted in and out of consciousness, "that first message you sent about your mother watching the birds and saying spring always comes after winter." "I remember," he whispered, his voice weak. "She was right. Spring always comes." "It does," Norah agreed, tears streaming down her face. "And we had so many springs together, so many seasons of growth and joy. I would not trade a single day of our life together." "Neither would I," Jackson said. "You were my spring, Norah. You brought life to my winter heart. Every day with you was a gift." He rallied slightly over the next few days, enough to see each of his children and grandchildren, to say goodbye and share final words of love and advice. To James, he said, "Take care of the land and it will take care of you, but never let it become more important than the people you love." To Jane, he said, "Keep teaching, keep pushing the world to be better. Your words will change lives just as your mother's changed mine." To each grandchild he had specific words, carefully chosen for their individual natures and needs. To Norah, his final words were simple but complete. "Thank you," he said, his hand gripping hers with what strength remained. "Thank you for seeing me, for loving me, for building this life with me. You were the answer to every question I never knew to ask. I love you, Norah. I will always love you." Jackson York passed away peacefully on a warm spring morning, with Norah holding his hand and the sound of birdsong coming through the open window. He was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch, in a spot he had chosen years before, where he could watch over the land and the family he had loved so well. Norah grieved deeply, but not hopelessly. She had the memories of 40 wonderful years, of a love that had been built on words and grown into something solid and lasting. She had her children and grandchildren, the ranch that she and Jackson had built together, and the leather-bound journals he had filled with their story. She began to transcribe his journals into clean copies, making sure that every word was preserved for future generations. As she worked, she felt close to him again, hearing his voice in every sentence, seeing his face in every carefully chosen word. It was a labor of love that took her 2 years to complete, but when she was done, she had created something precious. A complete record of their life together, from that first telegram to their final goodbye. Norah lived another 12 years after Jackson's death, remaining active and engaged with her family and community. She attended Jane's Teachers College lectures when she visited Little Rock, helped Clara with the grandchildren, and advised James on ranch business. She kept chickens until she was too old to care for them properly, then supervised while the grandchildren took over the task. She never remarried. When asked about it by well-meaning friends, she would smile and say, "I had the great love of my life. One was enough. On a cool autumn evening in 1934, Nora Zimmerman York passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73. She was buried beside Jackson on the hill overlooking the ranch, under a stone that read, "Nora Zimmerman York, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother." She understood the power of words and the depth of love. At her funeral, Jane stood before the gathered family and friends and read from the journals her mother had transcribed, the story of how a cowboy's words on paper had made a telegraph operator fall in love before they ever met. She read about the first message, the first meeting, the first date. She read about the proposal, the wedding, the building of a family and a ranch and a legacy. "My mother used to say that she fell in love with my father's words before she fell in love with the man himself," Jane said. But what she really fell in love with was the heart behind the words, the care and intention and deep feeling that he put into every message. "My father learned from my grandmother that words matter, and he taught that lesson to all of us. How we speak to each other, how we express our love and our needs and our dreams, shapes our relationships and our lives. My parents built their marriage on a foundation of carefully chosen words, and that foundation was strong enough to last a lifetime and beyond." The family gathered after the funeral at the main ranch house, now run by James's oldest son, Michael. They looked through Nora's transcribed journals together, marveling at the detail and care with which Jackson had recorded their life. In the pages, they found not just a story of two people falling in love, but a template for how to build a life together, how to communicate with honesty and care, how to maintain connection even through difficult times. Among Nora's possessions, they found a letter she had written to be read after her death. In it, she thanked each of her children and grandchildren for the joy they had brought to her life. She asked them to remember that love was not just a feeling but a choice, made every day through actions and words. She reminded them that connection required effort and intention, but that it was worth every bit of work it required. The letter ended with these words, "I was once a lonely woman in a telegraph office, transcribing other people's lives and wishing for my own. Then a cowboy walked through my door with words that touched my heart, and everything changed. He taught me that words can build bridges across any distance, that carefully chosen phrases can express the deepest truths of the heart. Our love story began with messages sent through the wire, but it grew into something solid and real and lasting. Remember that words matter. Choose them carefully. Use them to build connections and express love. They have the power to change lives, just as they changed mine. With all my love, Nora." The letter was passed around and read by each family member, and many of them copied it to keep and share with their own children. It became a sort of family creed, a reminder of the values that Jackson and Nora had built their life upon. In the years that followed, the York Ranch continued to thrive under Michael's management and later his children's. The family remained close, gathering for holidays and celebrations, always mindful of the legacy that Jackson and Nora had created. The leather-bound journals were kept in a place of honor in the main house, available for any family member who wanted to read them and connect with their heritage. Jane's daughter became a writer, publishing books and articles that often touched on themes of communication and connection. She credited her great-grandmother's story as her inspiration, the tale of how a telegraph operator fell in love with a cowboy through his words. James's descendants remained on the land, each generation adding to and improving what came before, but never forgetting the roots that held them fast. The original telegraph office in Bentonville, where Nora had worked, was long gone, replaced by modern buildings and businesses. But in the town's small museum, there was a display about the history of communication in the area. In that display was a replica telegraph key, and several examples of old messages. Among them, preserved under glass, was one of Jackson's original telegrams to his mother, donated by the York family. The placard beside it read, "This telegram was sent by Jackson York to his mother, Sarah York, in 1883. It was transcribed by Nora Zimmerman, who would later become Jackson's wife. Their love story began with words on paper, messages sent and received with care and attention. They built a family and a ranch that continues to thrive today, a legacy of love and careful communication." Visitors to the museum would stop and read the telegram, marveling at the simple, heartfelt words. "Mama, I am glad you are well. The winter has been long here too, but the first calves are coming and they are strong. I think of you every morning when the sun rises. I see your strength in it. The work is hard but honest, and I am proud to do it. Your loving son, Jackson." Some would smile at the sweetness of it, the obvious love between mother and son. Others would read the placard and feel moved by the story of how such simple words had sparked a great love. But all of them, in some small way, were touched by the reminder that words matter, that how we communicate shapes our relationships and our lives. And so the legacy continued, generation after generation, a testament to the power of carefully chosen words and the deep connections they could create. Jackson York, a cowboy who learned from his mother that words matter, had sent messages that captured a telegraph operator's heart. Nora Zimmerman, a lonely woman searching for connection, had found it in those words and in the man who wrote them. Together, they had built a love that lasted a lifetime and a legacy that would endure for generations. Their story became part of family legend, told and retold at gatherings, adapted and embellished perhaps, but always maintaining its essential truth. That love can begin in the most unexpected ways, that words have power, and that careful attention to how we communicate can build bridges that last forever. The cowboy and the telegraph operator had found each other across the wire, their words creating a connection that distance and time could not diminish. And from that connection, they had built something beautiful and lasting. As the years rolled on into the 1940s and beyond, as the world changed in ways Jackson and Norah could never have imagined, their descendants continued to hold fast to the values they had instilled. In times of trouble, they remembered Jackson's words about hard and honest work. In times of joy, they remembered Norah's emphasis on connection and communication. When relationships faltered, they went back to the journals and read about how their ancestors had navigated disagreements and difficulties through patient communication and genuine care. The ranch itself became a symbol of what could be built when two people came together with shared values and complementary strengths. What had started as 20 acres and a dream had grown into a substantial operation, but more importantly, it had become a gathering place for family, a touchstone that connected them to their past and to each other. Every summer, the extended family would gather for a reunion on the ranch, and part of the tradition was reading passages from Jackson's journals, keeping the story alive for the newest generation. On the 100th anniversary of Jackson and Norah's wedding, in 1984, over 200 descendants gathered at the York Ranch. The family had grown and spread, with members living across Arkansas and beyond, but they all came home for this celebration. A historical marker was placed near the site of the original small house where Jackson and Norah had first lived, commemorating their legacy. The eldest living descendant, Jackson's granddaughter by Jane, now 92 years old, gave a speech about what her grandparents had meant to her. "I was just a girl when grandmother Norah died," she said, her voice wavering but strong, "but I remember her clearly. She was kind and patient, always willing to listen, always able to find the right words to comfort or encourage. She told me once about how she fell in love with my grandfather's words before she ever saw his face, how she would transcribe his telegrams and feel her heart open a little more with each message. She said that falling in love with someone's words is falling in love with their soul, and that is the deepest love there is. I have tried to live by that wisdom, to pay attention to how people speak and write, to use my own words carefully and with intention. I hope all of you will do the same, will honor our grandparents' legacy by remembering that words matter, that communication is the foundation of love and connection. The gathered family applauded, and many wiped away tears. After the ceremony, they toured the ranch together, visiting the graves on the hill, walking through the main house where some of Jackson and Norah's original furniture was still in use, carefully preserved and maintained. They looked at photographs and artifacts, letters and documents, all the physical remnants of two lives well lived. But the most treasured artifacts remained the journals, now carefully digitized to preserve them, but still available in their original form for those who wanted to hold the pages that Jackson had touched, to see his handwriting flowing across the paper as he recorded his love for Norah and the life they had built. Reading his words, you could feel his voice speaking across the decades, earnest and honest and full of love. In one particularly touching passage, written shortly before his death, Jackson had reflected on the role that words had played in his life. "I was never an educated man in the formal sense," he wrote. "I left school young to work and help support my mother, but she taught me something more valuable than anything I could have learned from books. She taught me that words are sacred, that they carry weight and meaning, that how we use them shapes not just how others perceive us, but how we perceive ourselves." When I began sending telegrams to her during her illness, I did not realize I was also sending a message about who I was and who I wanted to be. Norah saw that message. She understood that a man who takes care with his words is a man who takes care with his heart. Our love began with words on paper, but it grew into something that words alone could never fully express. Still, I have tried to record it here, to leave behind some testament to what we shared, so that our children and grandchildren might understand what is possible when two people truly see each other and commit to building a life together. Words brought us together, but love, daily tended and carefully maintained, has kept us together through every season of our lives. Reading those words, the family understood that they were not just descendants of two people who had fallen in love. They were the inheritors of a philosophy, a way of being in the world that valued communication, honesty, and the careful cultivation of connection. That legacy was as valuable as any land or money, and it was one that could be passed on indefinitely if each generation committed to living by its principles. As the sun set on that 100th anniversary celebration, the family gathered on the hill by the graves of Jackson and Norah. They stood in a circle holding hands, and each person said one word that described what their ancestors' legacy meant to them. "Love," someone said. "Connection," said another. "Words, care, intention, family, honesty, loyalty, home." The words circled around the group, each one a tribute and a promise, a commitment to carrying forward what had been begun so long ago in a telegraph office in Bentonville. When the last person had spoken, they stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and orange, just as Jackson and Norah had done so many times from their porch. The land stretched out before them, cultivated and cared for by generations of hands, a testament to what could be built when love and work combined with intention and care. Then, as if by unspoken agreement, they began to sing, An old hymn that Jackson and Nora had loved, about grace and love and being home at last. Their voices rose into the evening air, carried by the wind across the ranch, across the land that two people had loved and tended and passed on to those who came after. And in that moment, standing together on that hill, singing that old song, they all felt the presence of their ancestors, the cowboy and the telegraph operator who had started it all with words on paper and love in their hearts. The story of Jackson York and Nora Zimmerman was not just a story of the past. It was a living thing, still shaping and guiding those who carried their blood and their values. Every time a family member chose their words carefully, every time they reached out to maintain a connection despite distance or difficulty, every time they committed to honest communication and genuine care, they were honoring the legacy that had begun with a telegram sent in 1883. And so the story continued, not with an ending but with a continuation, as all the best love stories do. The love that Jackson and Nora had built did not die with them, but lived on in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the land they had cultivated, in the values they had instilled, and most of all, in the words they had left behind, carefully chosen and lovingly recorded, a bridge across time connecting past to present to future, reminding everyone who read them that words matter, that love matters, and that the two together can build something that lasts forever.